Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
So we like to keep a unified set of tooling, and we want to always bring our tooling forward and work in our projects. So if we're using Composer, we want to use the most recent Composer within reason, the newest PHP, the newest Laravel. And it's nice to kind of have a reference on how we do stuff. And so for a couple of years, we've published like a sort of skeleton of maybe this is what a Laravel project would look like with all of our tooling set up in a brand new greenfield thing. And
Yeah.
without any functionality, just kind of like, here's all the tooling probably configured the best that it would be on this project as if it was a real project. And then you can take a look at that. It's on our GitHub page. Recently, I was looking at it and I'm like, wow, it's been out of date. We haven't updated it for a while. There's new Laravel versions, all that kind of stuff. And I decided to start looking through it and update that. And there's a lot that's changed since last time we touched it.
Please elaborate, because I have some things in mind, because I think I did the last update. But I'm just curious, because when we talked about doing this, I was thinking to myself, there's not that much that changed. So I look forward to hearing what you
It was
came up
over
with.
a year ago that the last update happened to it.
Oh, man.
So it's on Laravel 10. So,
Well, to be fair, like we don't actually it's not about actually creating installable Laravel application.
well,
It's
right.
more like how we set up the Docker containers and our composer scripts and things like
Right.
that. So maybe I didn't actually bump it forward because I thought I did it for at least for Laravel 12, but that still would have only been 6 months ago. All right.
Yeah.
I trust you.
So yeah, no, basically that was my consideration. Was like, I know that we're not creating a skeleton, and a lot
Yeah.
of the projects we go and work on, we're not starting brand new.
No.
So it was always kind of like a skeleton-ish project.
It's a
But like,
reference. I think
Yeah.
of it as a reference guide.
yeah. And so as I was kind of doing this process, thinking about how to update it and upgrade it, I started thinking of two different challenges that came to mind. One was we have a way of doing stuff with Tailwind 2 or Tailwind 3 or with Vue 2 or Vue 3 or with Laravel 10, and then stuff changed to 12. And so there's kind of this history, and some of the projects we work on aren't always the most recent version or, stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And so if I want to look at maybe a client's project that is an older version of something, I might actually have to go back through the history of our project standards into old commits to try to find out when we had set up something that was more in that version. I didn't
Okay.
really like that idea when I was starting to look forward. I was like, there's some good stuff here that would be fine if we're touching something with a little bit older stuff. And when I say older too, sometimes we choose to use a little slightly older technology because it's more proven. So for example, when a new version of Livewire comes out, I want to use it, but I'm not going to use it right away. I'm going to let some of the features and bug reports and all that kind of stuff work through.
Yeah.
So it's not always that the newest version is even what we want. So we have this sort of juggling of, this is how we do it at a certain version. We want to do it for newer versions. Some of our projects, we need to know the older stuff. Some of we need to know the newer stuff. So I started thinking about well, maybe I should make tags for different
Sure.
stuff like that. We can kind of look through that history and see what that is.
Yeah.
And then I kind of started thinking, okay, am I being a little silly here? Because I'm attacking
Never.
it like a project, like an installable thing.
Yeah.
Yet we keep saying it's not it's not
Right.
something to build off of. So why am I so stuck at building a framework-based configuration here? Can't I don't know, read the manual and find the stuff myself? Well, yeah, but then I have to remember where to find all this stuff. I have to remember how I did it, and maybe I have to look in old projects. Then I started thinking about what are some of the things that I know about programming in general. So back up away from PHP and Laravel, and that I've learned from other languages, JavaScript, and even some of the stuff I'm learning about AI. And I started thinking well, there is ways to kind of restructure my thought process about this set of documentation or tooling. Is let's make it into more of a composable sort of thing.
Okay.
So instead of having a whole project install, because a lot of the stuff, like we installed Laravel and then we, modified a few files, the rest of it we never really touched. It was just more configuring external additional tools.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, why do I need to actually have a version of that configured? Most often I've done it in a client project and been like, yes, this is what I agree with at this time. So I'm going to keep a version of that, and kind of say like, this is the most newest version, our best practice. Why don't I just start making folders based off the tooling and the major version and put the needed files inside of there. So I'll give you an example.
So I just want to make sure I'm
Yeah,
following. So if you looked at our thing before this change, you would have seen essentially the Laravel app skeleton,
right,
like 95% of it we didn't touch.
right.
And now you're saying, what if it's only like it might still have bootstrap slash app if we do something in there, but it's
Nope,
not going to
nope,
have config whatever if we don't
probably
touch it.
not. No,
Okay, okay.
I'm saying one step further, removed, which is what if we sort of said at a top level, what are some of the toolings that we use and what are some of the versions? So
Okay.
I'm going to pick PHPUnit. I know that the PHPUnit configuration for the XML, PHPUnit XML,
Yeah,
is different for our configuration between 11 and 12.
correct.
Some projects have 11, most have 12. I want to have both of those XML I want both of those space and time available to me so that when I go to a project, I know, are we using 11? Are we using 12? Can I look at my reference and pick the thing I want from there?
And then
So
when
I would make,
13 is what we use, then you just create a new folder for
yep,
13. And if it's the same as 12, would you just have two copies of it or you haven't
yeah,
thought of it?
yeah,
Okay.
because that would be what it, and I would doubt it would be the exact same
Right, it
because,
never is.
if we're looking at stuff, stuff's going to change in that file, but also we learn something new each time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have to go back and update some of these. I might, if I re-implement it again. So if I've learned some
Mm,
stuff that all the way I get to PHPUnit 13 or something, I've learned how to do something even better in PHPUnit. So
sure.
for example, linking to the XSD that describes the functionality inside the XML file, I didn't know about that until maybe 12. Then next time that I touch the 11 stuff, if I find that helpful, I might put that functionality in there if it's useful. But I'm not really concentrating on updating stuff that's older. I have a pretty good concept of at that point in time what I thought was best, and I'll update it if I have to reach back there.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking the thought process I'm having is like, what if we had been doing this from the very beginning, right? So PHP unit, whatever, 4 or 5,
Mhm.
like you'd have all these folders. You're clearly not going to go back through every single one.
Right.
So your rule of like, hey, if I'm about to pull in, like we just joined a legacy project or something, and they can only run PHP unit 8.
Yeah.
Then we might, this isn't quite how we do it. Maybe we then decide to update the version 8 in our repository, but that's the only thing that would cause us to go backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking about it's less of like a sort of project structure and how all these things fit in, but more of like a top level tooling set where it's like maybe there's a README that describes why you might use each one of our tooling.
Mm-hmm.
And by our tooling, I mean our configuration of a tooling that exists in PHP. So why might we want to use this XML, or why would you go inside of PHPUnit folder? Well, there's going to be an XML and maybe some other stuff in there. And so it kind of says at a high level, you might go into this folder to find some configuration, go find the version you want, and then that's kind of our reference going forward.
All right. So uh, is there a folder for Laravel then, or that doesn't exist?
Well, I don't know. I haven't really thought that through
Okay. Hey,
because
let me give
I,
a specific question because maybe
yeah,
this will help us decide. PHP unit is a good example because there is the PHP unit.xml, and maybe there's like a composer script or something that we'd have in a composer JSON. Um, but there's also ways that we structure tests. Like we like to use
mhm.
refresh database, and we like to have, um, I know we have like a deep inspection trait that we bring in sometimes. Like, would all of that stuff live in the PHP unit folder because it's test related, or what are your thoughts
I
on
don't
that?
know. That's an interesting question. I guess maybe if you agree with this process, I'll find out when I make this change.
Okay.
But I don't know if I would say that would go into PHP. I don't know because
Yeah,
on one hand I can see because it's related to that, but on the other hand, it is actual configuration customization we're doing to the Laravel project,
correct.
which would be nice to see in context.
Yeah.
And like this is a really good example because that is a place in the Laravel project that we do heavily modify, but other places we don't. So if you were like saying, how do we register Horizon with a specialized gate check?
Yeah.
I might just have that in its own Horizon folder. I'm
Okay.
not sure because it's why I don't necessarily need a whole application to show one or two different lines inside of a
Yeah.
service provider. And I was afraid it might get lost in there
It
too.
would for sure. It would. It's like, well, which of these are the files that I actually changed that are relevant that I need to bring in? Um, I mean, Horizon's another good one too because like we use Docker And so we have a Docker compose file, and we would have to have a container for Horizon. Like, would that go in the Horizon folder, or is there like a Docker folder that would have all the stuff possible in it that we
Yeah,
would?
I think about that as maybe, again, we're just kind of brainstorming. So I
Yeah.
guess we'll find out when we publish this repo. But I look at like the Docker stuff as it all kind of goes together. So like
Right.
in my mind, even though um I might implement JavaScript inside of my Laravel project, I'd probably not necessarily have the JavaScript in the Laravel folder. It probably in some other folder named after
Sure.
the JavaScript functionality.
Yep. Okay. I mean, it definitely solves a problem. I have felt the pain of, especially when you're straddling versions. Like PHPUnit bumped major versions pretty rapidly
Yeah.
um, in the last few years, and so, and like even with some significant changes to how the configuration file is built. So I do like the way this approach solves that problem of versioning. And you know, it's we still have some more things to figure out in terms of how the technologies overlap. You know, like again, we've talked about maybe we use Pest for the browser-based testing. Like that's going to interact with our PHP unit tests. And so do we just have a testing folder then, or do we still have like a Pest and a PHP unit folder? We'll have to figure that out.
Right. And then does the testing mean, well, that's JavaScript testing in there
Yeah,
too? Or,
right.
yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to figure out. I'm sort of going at like the level of a technology is the organization, because that's kind of how I tend to think. I don't think
Hmm.
about Horizon, I think about Docker, and then I think about Horizon in Docker.
Same.
I don't think about like, what do I need to get Horizon working? I think, what do I need to get Docker working for this Horizon container?
Yeah, I would feel the same way because I there was a project where we just added Horizon to it. I wouldn't look for Horizon folder. I'd go to the Docker configuration. Like, how did we set up like the health check for Horizon and have it
Yeah.
restart itself? And like all that stuff's going to be in Docker. And so that's I think about it the same way.
So I think the takeaway here is, we kind of looked at this and I said, I'll make some changes. I wanted to kind of surprise Joel on a podcast. We hadn't talked about this before, see what his thoughts were. And then to kind of look at stuff you're doing over the time and say, like, does this still make sense? I don't think we were wrong with how we set it up the first time. I
No,
just think that we're more right now.
yeah, it served a purpose at the time, and it
Mhm.
worked great as we were like rolling this into new projects. But now that you've lived with it for a while, you're like, yeah, it breaks down in a couple places. So I think this is a good evolution. So Aaron, I wanted to talk about your vinyl collection. You have a collection of records.
I absolutely do not.
You don't?
No, I listen to lossless audio.
You're going straight from the masters and straight into your bone conducting headphones.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I just find that weird because this is a record podcast, right? We talk about records. I mean, when I 10 minutes before we recorded, my calendar thing said in 10 minutes, record podcast.
Oh. Documentation is so tough. I don't even know why I took on this project of making more documentation for ourselves. Oh,
You know, developers don't like documentation, myself included, but it does really add a lot of value to the project. If you'd like help getting your project better documented, head over to nocompromises.io and we can help.